Hey guys, Brian delivers you the goods here. Just thought I'd return to you this afternoon, finally, for another review for Hardy Country, his new album that I got a chance to listen to for myself, see what I was going to think of this record overall. So I'm going to discuss what I listened to for the 20 tracks on this record, his new album, and let you know my thoughts on the record in its entirety. So let's dive into this album review. Now it starts with the title track, Country, which actually is a pretty good track from what I listened to. Granted, it's not going to be like that his hard rock stuff, but from what I listened to, it does have some drums and guitar work in it, and it sounds pretty solid, so it's a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed this track for the opening song on the record. Favorite country song is another good one that I enjoyed. Sorry, that's my cat using the litter box. Sorry about that scratching noise. But overall, favorite country song is another nice song and sounds nice with the acoustic guitar work from Hardy in this track. So I really dig this one. It's another 5 out of 5. It was another enjoyable track that I personally enjoyed, that I can get on board with. It's very nice and melodic too. Bro Country featuring Ernest is another strong track. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this at first because when I first reviewed it, didn't know what to think of it. But as of listening to it, after a little while, it's a fairly strong track for how it sounds. Even Ernest sounded pretty good with his verse in the second verse of the song, and Hardy coming in to open the track did pretty well. So it's another 5 out of 5. Luckiest Man Alive is another nice acoustic guitar song and does very well with how the melody is sounding and orchestrated very well. So really enjoyed this track for how it played out, and Hardy's vocals sounded pretty solid in this. So another 5 out of 5. Car That Drove You Away is another strong track that I enjoyed. I'd give it a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed Hardy's singing in this track, and just with the execution overall with his vocals and just the melody, how it structurally sounds, did very well for how it sounded. So 5 out of 5. Girl with a Gun was probably my least favorite. It wasn't the worst track, but I think it's pretty good in its own way. Just I have a few critiques with this one, so it's a 4.75 out of 5. It's still a pretty good song. It's just I have some critiques with this one. It just with the lyrics, it sounded a little iffy. Buck on the Wall is another one that I think is the least favorite. Don't hate it, but I do like some of the way the message behind the song is trying to address about how his granddaddy started with the buck on the wall. But overall, it's a solid track, so 4.75 out of 5. I'd Go Crazy Too is another solid track. Not my favorite, but not the worst thing I've heard. But it is a fairly pretty good song in its own way. So another 4.75 out of 5 is deserving for this track too. It did pretty good in its own way. Take the Country and Run is another one that I wasn't sure how I was feeling about, but I still think it's enjoyable for how it is in its own way. Just have a few critiques with how it's sounding, but overall, it didn't do bad with Hardy's singing potential, so 4.75 out of 5. Goodbye is a nice melodic song from Hardy, and it did alright for the execution for the most part. So, not my favorite, not the worst thing I've heard, but a fairly solid track in its own way. So 4.75 out of 5. Bedrooms in the Sky featuring Steven Wilson Jr. is another strong track I enjoyed. Steven Wilson Jr. sounded pretty strong with his vocals from time to time, and overall, Hardy came in the second verse and it sounded fairly strong. So it's a strong track, 5 out of 5. Then we get to Bottom Land, which was one of the singles I reviewed in early August, which was a very strong track from what I listened to. Really enjoyed this song, and Hardy sounded good vocally in this track, so I really dig this song, 5 out of 5. It is a mellow song and nice acoustic work too, but it does very well for the execution. Who Don't is a very strong track too. I really like the melody behind it, and the beat is pretty catchy behind the track. And overall, Hardy's singing performance in this track, his performance with his singing did very well. So it's a 5 out of 5 for me for this one. Country in Me is another track I can get on board with. I'd give it a 5 out of 5. I think with how Hardy is singing this track did fairly well, and the drumming and guitar work was very strong in this, so another one that I can get on board with. So 5 out of 5. Gun to My Head actually had a catchy beat for sure. Really dug this track for how it sounded, so it's another 5 out of 5. I think when Hardy's singing this track, it did fairly well, and overall, for the execution of the melody and structure-wise, it was a pretty strong track in its own way. So, 5 out of 5. Keep It Country is another strong track I can get on board with. Another 5 out of 5 is Deserving for It. I think with how it sounds, it did fairly well for the execution. Sorry, it's raining right now where I'm at. And it overall did fairly well for how it sounded. And Hardy's vocals shined in this track, so 5 out of 5. Y'all Need Jesus was kind of a diss track to some guy or whatever, George Carson or something like that, who he basically was making a song that was saying y'all need Jesus and all that stuff. So honestly, it's a strong track, but I think I have a few critiques with this one. But overall, it's still a strong track for how it sounds. And Hardy's comedic moments with this track, where he kind of hits it where it hurts with people's feelings and how how people are gonna react to this track. But it overall did alright, so 5 out of 5. Dog Years is a mellow song. It was the last single for this record's announcement, and it overall came out last Friday, but it did very well for the execution. Nice track, nice melody, very mellow too. So, a very nice track to talk about his dog in this. So, 5 out of 5. We're All Gonna Die is a strong track in its own way. I think with the execution, it did fairly well for how it sounded, and Hardy's vocals did sound very strong for how it was, so 5 out of 5. Really enjoyed how Hardy's singing it and how the drumming and guitar work sounds in the second verse and the chorus. That's where it shines the most. Everybody Does is the closing track to the record, and overall it's a solid closing track. Wouldn't say it's my favorite one, but solid enough to listen through, so 4.75 out of 5. Overall, production, mixing, and execution-wise, I think Hardy Country for his new album is a pretty good listen. Granted, it's not going to be the best thing I've heard this year, but it is pretty strong material from what I listened to. So the songs did grow on me throughout time, certain ones from his Country EP earlier this year. But overall, from what I listened to, it's good material for sure. So if I were to give Hardy's Country album a score, I think I'm feeling a very solid 8.5 out of 10. It's a pretty good record. Definitely recommend you check this out if you have not listened to it. It came out this Friday, September 26th. It is a pretty good record in its own way, and it does very well for the execution for the most part. So 8.5 out of 10 for Hardy, Country Country for his new album. I hope you enjoyed this album review this afternoon, and thank you guys for watching.